hopefully everybody can see me. This is always the weird part where it's like, oh, now we're live. But I'm Nick Taylor. I founded Taylor and Taylor Whiskey Co. with my brother, who is what we like to call the gremlin in the weeds right now. He's on the Facebook Live, chatting with all of you. And then, of course, we have Sammy in there as well. But I wanted to introduce, hey, fellas, I wanted to introduce Phil, who the people who've been following along know is our technical expert and our producer here. Basically, as this goes, if you have questions, put them into the feed. If our boys don't answer them, Phil will feed them up to us, and we'll get them over to Steph. And of course, we have Steph Ridgeway. Steph, there's two things. First, I promised Bill from the Malt Imposters.
Oh, okay. I love Bill.
I know. I said that I would say hello and give you his virtual best. He misses you and he wishes you were here in person in Boston. I know, but for those of you who don't know Malt Imposters, check them out. They're like the coolest whiskey writers in town. But now I want to properly introduce Steph Ridgeway, whose official title is one of the most epic and legendary titles in the business. Let me see if I get this right. I had to actually write it down. Okay, Steph is the North American Manager of Brand Education at International Beverage Holdings Limited. Damn. Right? Did I get that right?
You got it 110% right. You know what? I gotta have a sip of whiskey. Yes. For that, right?
Wait a second, Steph. What the hell are you drinking out of
mason jar?
I'm drinking out of a mason jar. Why am I drinking out of a mason jar? Because you know what? When you're in the middle of a global pandemic, glassware is overrated. All due respect to Glencairn and, of course, my favorite, the fellas at Denver and Liley, but I've just gotten such a kick. You know, my glass at the end of the day is bigger than yours. So
hey, my glass is bigger than yours. This is a great answer.
That's
but
why
hold
I'm
on.
of it.
Yeah. I want to go back to the title because what the hell does that actually mean, right? Because like I say it, but like what's that? What does that mean, and what does that mean you get to do? Well, right, because that's also important.
First of all, I like to say that I don't actually carry around a business card. I wear just a placard around my neck because it's such a long title and I have to take a couple of breaths when I'm talking to people. But just to call it down and what a term everybody will understand. I'm the North American brand ambassador for arguably one of the coolest, most respected single malt portfolios in the world, in my personal opinion. Something for everybody. But after that's all said and done, if you can't remember all of that rigmarole, I'm just the whiskey chick. It's just the whiskey chick. And I wake up every morning and I get to interact with people such as you and Zach, you're not there, and Sammy, you're not there. You know how much I love you. And my new friend, Phil. I just get to preach the gospel of, again, just some really badass single malt. That's what I do.
What distilleries? I mean, a lot of people know, but right. Hey, some people might not.
No. We've got it's not one as you mentioned, Nick. We've got a consortium, a portfolio, and no particular order of favorite, just to kind of name them all. I do Speyburn, which is just a beautiful little Speyside distillery, which interestingly enough is a top 10 single malt in the U.S. I like to say we're the biggest single malt nobody's ever heard of. I just need 100,000 more people in hearing of it because, boy, we could rule the world with that one. We've got Balblair, which is the oldest operating distillery in the North Highlands. Some of the sexiest whiskey that I've ever drank. We've got Enoch, which is a whiskey produced at Knockdhu, which sits right on the border of Speyside and Highlands, and it is considered a Highland whiskey, but it brings together all of the best attributes of both of those regions, producing styles. Fun, you can't pronounce the name. It doesn't sound like it reads on the bottle. It's not the name of the whiskey, is not the distillery. I almost think we need to do a whole other one of these so we can talk about how cool that is. And then we've got Old Pulteney, which, full disclosure, so anybody that's paying attention, I have long been a fan of this distillery, long before I figured out a way to help it pay my mortgage. So now I get paid to drink Old Pulteney, which is
That's a win.
whiskey drinker's dream. And then just as an honorable mention, it's not all about whiskey for me. We do have a really, really unique gin in the portfolio that is actually produced at a working whiskey distillery in the Speyside. The distillery is called Balmenic. No, we're not producing whiskey for sale yet, but you never know. Like if I can give away all the secrets. But this gin is, I like to say, it's the gin that turned this whiskey chick into a gin drinker. So maybe there's something down the line when we're really, really super hot and sweaty and needing a G&T that we could talk about gin down the line. But yeah, It's a whole bunch of things that I get to wake up and just talk about and drink. Super cool.
And you can't tell us which is your first distillery, right? Can you just like give me a wink if it's, or how about this? Who's your favorite of the distillery managers? Now I can get you in a lot of trouble.
Not enough money minted for me to say that out there. I love them all like family. I've spent a lot of time at each of these distilleries working, and not fluffy marketing, let's get a good Instagram photo, but quite literally running mashes and stenciling casks and measuring weights and running mash just doing all of that, where it's so funny, to the point where the distillery teams would say, Steph, we're going to go to the tea hut and have lunch. Do you have this? And it'd be like, well, you don't care what happens in 12 years. I'm good. So
exactly. Right.
So I've got a chance to really interact on a personal level and a professional level for like a lot of time. So they're just all such amazing guys in their own unique way. So I can't say I have a favorite, and I can't say I have a favorite whiskey, but I will say that.
Yeah.
Old Pulteney, again, I've been drinking Old Pulteney for a very long time. And if John McDonald and John Ross are watching at Bell Blair, you know how much I love you guys. And I drink Speyburn on a regular basis. But when I accepted this job 3 years ago with International Beverage, I had maybe 1 dram of Old Pulteney 17 left in my cabinet. And that's what I chose to sign my offer letter. So I poured that dram to say, I get to come do this. So it just holds a special place in my heart. But again, they all hold a special place in my heart. You've literally just asked me to pick my favorite child.
I know. I think I remember talking to Malcolm, and the Old Pulteney 17, which you just mentioned, was like his favorite. And when he was telling me that when the Old Pulteney 21 year won the World Whiskey Award, Best Whiskey in Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible. He was telling me that when they called him and they were talking about the award, he was positive they were actually talking about the 17, which is like just it's what I used to call like it's a manager's dram, right? It's what the distillery managers are always drinking. The 17 year is just a
17
dime.
is stunning bottle of whiskey.
The 15 though is new, but I could drink that all day.
That's what I'm drinking right now. So I actually do drink it all day in this.
In this situation, why not? But I think one of the cool things I wanted to ask you about was the, for the job, you get to travel to all of the different places in the U.S. and you get a pretty unique perspective on the different drinking cultures. And yes. we have a ton of Boston viewers today. And I've always thought that Boston has a really cool whiskey community.
Yeah, you absolutely do. You have a great whiskey culture up there in Boston. So much so that your market was picked to be one of 7 for the national launch of the new Old Pulteney Core range. And that didn't come lightly. We didn't look at necessarily the biggest volume driver markets. We looked at the markets where we knew the brand was appreciated and revered and loved, and the excitement would be there. So I have to agree with you. Boston, I've spent a lot of time in Boston, like with you and without you, and in a previous life, on other whiskey brands. Always one of my favorite cities to come to. I mean, it is to be able to just come hang out, and I just search out. I'm like, it's going to sound very cliched. I'm like, I want a place with that serves my whiskey and has the best lobster rolls. I'm real easy to please.
Ooh, best lobster roll is
well, because
really
there's many
question.
places, so I never run short of somebody's like opinion. So it just depends on best lobster roll. So I get to eat lobster rolls breakfast, lunch, and dinner when I'm up there, and because of the nature of Old Pulteney, it pairs so well with seafood. It's just a match made in heaven.
That's yeah, definitely. I'm really curious if we have people in here who are like, I'm sure that there are some Boston guys who are like, this is the best lobster roll in Boston. I'm gonna throw out I grew up down the street from Dairy Joy in Weston. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, that little it's like a knockoff Dairy Queen, and it's more expensive, but they would make lobster rolls, and people I knew people who would drive in the middle of their workday from Boston all the way to Weston to get their lobster roll and then drive back into the city. And it's just like a burger shack. And so it's funny you bring up lobster rolls.
That is what I'm talking about. So I think we just stumbled onto our next really cool activation when this ban is finally lifted. We're going to reach out to Ryan at Julio's, and we're going to get your lobster rolls, and we're going to do a lobster roll and pairing sampling.
Oh, there we go. I think we can facilitate that now if we can find some videos just virtually.
Don't do it without me. I want to.
No, we'll do it with you. We'll ship you the lobster roll. I'm sure it'll keep.
Well, it just needs to keep long enough to get here because it won't last in my house.
Oh man, it's really funny. It's funny you okay. So you mentioned that Old Pulteney pairs really well with lobster rolls, and one of the things that frustrates me about the regional designations when you look at Scotch is the term Highlands. It just covers so much territory.
Right.
And I think it takes away a little bit from a place like Wick, where Old Pulteney is, where the location actually really, really does dictate to the style. Right. And so, I mean, what do you think beyond just the whiskey itself, but also tell me a little bit about the whiskey. But what's when you think Old Pulteney and you think Wick, like what are the things that immediately come to mind for you?
I think I'm more fortunate than most because it's a fair guess that a lot of your followers and your whiskey aficionados that you engage with have maybe traveled to Scotland because it's a destination. It's a thing. They want to go and they want to drink whiskey. They want to go on distillery tours. And I think there's a certain sort of like general image of what Scotland is going to be like. We think of rolling green hills and golf courses and, elderly gentlemen with lilting Scottish accents who, are like, you have bagpipes wafting and hip flasks full of whiskey. And, there's like haggis at every turn. And you think of that. And that's not super far off the mark, speckled with Highland coups. And there's places in the Highlands, in the lowlands that you can certainly experience that. But when you take a look at the map of the Scottish mainland, I mean, and again, to just kind of put it in perspective, Texas is bigger than Scotland. Okay. So
right.
So it's not a giant country, but when to your point about the region, the Highlands just kind of covers everything north of the lowlands, which kind of the dividing line sits right about Glasgow, and you go north and the space side, but you get up there onto this northern coast of the mainland, and it's just a different breed of cat. Wick is, if you look at it on a global map, latitudinally, is 3 degrees higher than Moscow, Russia. So, I mean, think about like what that looks like for anybody that sort of remembers their 8th grade, geography class. That's pretty freaking high up there. And it sits, right there. The edge of it is on the North Sea, kind of the confluence of the North Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. So there's not trees growing up there. And, when you talk about wind, you talk about like grass, I mean, everything grows at a 45-degree angle. I mean, you talk to some like friends of mine in Glasgow, the Glaswegians are like, they like to joke, everybody in Wick walks at a 40-degree angle or 45-degree angle because they're walking, into the wind with their heads down. You can walk out of our distillery doorstep up there on Huddard Street. And if you were to walk 3 city blocks, anybody from New York, let's say you were walking from, I don't know, the Union Square subway station up to, I don't know, 6th Avenue, up 18th Street. And you take one more step and you fall off a cliff into the North Sea. I mean, it's like, I'm not making any of this up. There's a really interesting, and I just love it. If you're standing on this one particular side of the cliff and you're looking down, it looks as if there's a painted swimming pool, like a tidal pool down there. And it is in fact a painted swimming pool where Malcolm Waring, our distillery manager, they used to swim in there. That was the local swimming pool when they were all kids. It's called the Trinky. So, I mean, like the sea and where we're at, I mean, we're, 100 days out of the year, you got 80-mile-an-hour winds whipping off this North Sea. So we're up there hanging off the side of the cliff for dear life, making this whiskey. So when you think about the geography of Wick, or the north coast of Scotland, it's nothing like the gentle description of, the upper lowlands or the mid highlands. It's a different breed of cat altogether.
Yeah. And I find it's really interesting because, 2 things I think of, whenever I drink whiskey, whenever you drink whiskey, and if you drink enough whiskey, and I'll say that in terms of like, if you drink enough whiskey is in a number of times, I don't want to encourage people to just
responsibly speaking.
Yes, of course. Right. Okay. But if you drink enough whiskey, and you are lucky enough to travel to a place like Scotland, you can nose a whiskey and just really be taken to that place, just very emotionally. And I think Old Pulteney is one of those whiskeys that really does it, because you nose it and you just, it's like, I have the 12 in my glass right now.
Well, the 12 is the best expression for the nose. Like I like to say that the C shows up somehow, some way, albeit differently on every dram of Old Pulteney or every different expression. That 12, it's just this briny, it's just this waft, and it's delicate, but it is the best. Like to your point, it kind of takes you there, and it's an emotional experience. And for me, the 12, I refer to it as my session whiskey. We bottle it at 40 ABV. I can have a couple of drams. It's it's big, it's rich, it's viscous, it's all that cool stuff. Yeah. And it's a session whiskey. I can drink it, on regular. But, for anybody who has traveled to Scotland, I can understand not making the trip, because you're there for a 3 days, 5 days, what have you. I got on the train at Aviemore, and Aviemore is, not super far from Balmenic in the Speyside, and it still was a 4-hour train ride. So, but they say the stuff you have to work hardest for is usually the stuff you appreciate the most. So I highly recommend, if you can get over there and you have the ability to spend that extra day. I mean, you can also fly, really, and I've done that. And it's, you get on the plane, and the flight attendant kind of looks at everybody and says, yeah, you need to move up front and you need to move in back. They're literally gauging your weight to see where you need to be on the plane because you're flying into those winds. And it's like, all right, they're not serving me whiskey on the plane, but they do give me tonic caramel wafers. So, I can just kick back, have a biscuit and hope for the best. But it's about an hour flight out of Edinburgh. And if that, and 4-hour train ride, but if you can make it, it's an entirely different experience. I guess the same, can be said for Islay, if you get off of the West Coast. But
when I was there, we were Zach and I were traveling a lot, and we were going to a bunch of different places, and we had a lot of different things we needed to taste. And Zach sort of said, all right, I'll drive you taste. And the thing
You
is,
should be so happy he's your brother.
oh, I know. And
You owe him a big solid.
right. And the blood alcohol, the BAC you're allowed in Scotland is zero. It's it's 0.02 or whatever.
Yeah,
It's not like the US, right? You cannot have one drink and drive. And so he's driving. We're at Bablair, and we're making our way up to Wick, and we're just
going up the A9, right?
Yes, we're going up the A9, and we went up the coastal road, and I think the closest comp is driving Route 1 in California. I mean, it's different. It's like Scottish-ified. You know what I mean? Like it's different, but it's just so unique. And when you get up there and the smells and oh my God, it just
immediately hits you. It does.
Yes.
To your point, we would not be the whiskey we are if it wasn't for our provenance, where we sit. But, there's also some other absolutely amazing factors. And I think one equal to where we are, if not maybe even a little bit greater, is our master distiller, Malcolm Waring, who is the guy that makes this magic happen. Literally makes the magic happen. He's steering the ship up there. He's a native. I don't know. They call Wickers. They're called Wickers. He's a native Wicker. He's born and raised, and so he's been with the distillery or been with Inverhouse, which is the production arm of International Beverage. I think there was a short period of time that he spent down at Knockdhu, but been for like 30 years, producing Old Pulteney. He lives right across the street from it, so his heart and soul and heritage is entwined with this whiskey. So you've got the heritage, you've got the distiller, you've got this amazing maturation speed, very gentle, just because you have that jet stream coming up the Atlantic Ocean. It never spikes more than maybe 70 degrees Fahrenheit up there. That's a hot day. That's like, everybody's dying up there. Me, I'm like, I'm like usually shivering like a chihuahua when up there. But so you've got this amazing maturation speed. And, you also have some, and I might be like jumping ahead of the game, but you also have this really crazy still that really, I love this still story. I mentioned at the beginning that I thought, that Old Pulteney was just badass. And the story of the still is really, in addition to lending to the whiskey, making the whiskey what it is, it just really sort of separates us from the pack.
Yeah.
Care if I tell the story of the still?
No, bring it on.
Okay,
that's what we want. Okay. And
all right,
Phil, post a photo of it in the feed if you can.
Let me see if I can find one.
And when you do, I'm going to say that that this bottle, this very iconic, unique bottle, which the shape will never change, pays homage to our wash still, and there's a reason why. I'm sorry, label out.
Label out.
Yeah. Scotland's going to have my back by the scruff of the neck. Put the label out. So. A little bit of a backstory. Old Pulteney, the town of Wick, actually, we share something in common with the United States, which is very surprising to a lot of people, in that we were actually under Prohibition lockdown for 25 years. So I want to say it was from like it's just work backwards from like 1946, I think, 25 years back from that, where we had it for, I think it was 13 years here in the U.S. Pardon me for the math. I'm drinking whiskey, but so we were under this really ridiculous prohibition, where we were operating a still in a dry parish, which the still had to go dark because clearly we couldn't produce alcohol. And round about the time that it was reopening, and again, I think it's probably like the very early 50s, we had to have a new wash still produced. And Pulteney to this day still operates on two stills. We have one wash and one spirit. And I'm gonna quote Malcolm Waring to the best of my ability here. So back in the day, we are taking measurements to have this still produced, which is my best guess. It was probably maybe down in Glasgow, which is a very industrial town, and we didn't one thing we didn't have back then, obviously, was the luxury of a calculator. And to quote Malcolm Waring, they're just writing dimensions down on the back of a cigarette pack. I'm like, fair enough. It's whatever, and they're like, there's no facts. Somebody is like trying to, like, after a couple of drams of new make, stealing the whiskey out of the thief. We sent these down to the producer, the still manufacturer, and however long you had to wait, which I'm guessing, this huge copper monstrosity to get it. And then my best guess is they probably put it on a boat and brought it up by boat up the East Coast, probably the quickest, most economical way. And the harbor at Wick sits just right down the hill from the distillery. So I'm guessing they pulled it into the harbor, maybe even put it on a horse cart at that point to pull it up the hill and pull it onto the distillery ground. But what they realized when they brought it in was that they had miscalculated the area of the still house.
Oh dear.
So they dropped it. They had pulled the roof off the still house, and they dropped the still in, the wash still, and it didn't fit. So
was it too tall or too wide?
It was too tall. It was too tall.
Oh,
the
dear.
Swan neck, the swan neck just simply didn't fit. They couldn't get the roof back on. So we're Scottish, and we are not about to spend another red cent on getting another still like produced. And so we were like, what are we going to do? So, and I refer to this as Scottish ingenuity. We had to get on with the business of making whiskey. So what we did is we just hacked the swan neck off. Yes.
You can see in the
Hacked
picture for everyone at home. They can see the still with the capped top to it, and then the pipe just comes right out of the side.
The line arm to the condenser just comes right out of the side. So my first visit there, I'm standing up on the mezzanine and I'm looking down at this still with Malcolm, and I was like, Malcolm, what kind of still is that? And he looks at me and goes, it's a Pulteney still. And I'm going, so I'm going to date myself a little bit. So I've kind of got this Rolodex going through my head, like after visiting, several, dozens of distilleries. I'm like, Pulteney still. I looked at him, I go, is this a trick? And he's like, no. And he tells me the story. And I think that is just so ridiculously badass cool. But what that means to the whiskey is, we've lost a good 6 or 8 feet of the swan. So the distillate comes out of this giant onion boil bulb and just heads straight to, and here's for all you super geeks out there, 100% worm tub condenser. We're one of a handful left, the worms, straight through into the condenser into the worm tub. So what that is doing to the whiskey is it's producing this ridiculously rich, viscous, vegetal estery wash. So when I referred to Old Pulteney 12 is a thick, sticky, viscous whiskey, and I think that carries through the range, that is all a result of this very unique, one of a kind, we have to get this party going, wash still that we have now been operating with since the 50s.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I think you can always chew Pulteney.
You have
really
to chew
fun,
Pulteney.
right?
You have to chew Pulteney. Pulteney's a chewy whiskey. It's like chewing gum.
It's like chewing gum.
Right.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that goes a little unnoticed is you mentioned that Malcolm's been there for 30 years. And the whiskey industry is really cool in that these guys are there for a really long time, and we all think that's cool. But actually, it serves a really functional purpose. And one of the things I was really excited to talk about with you was the warehouses. And in Kentucky, you get more of this, where the master distiller really gets a feel for the warehouses. In Scotland, it's usually all dunnage. It's usually all these one-story cellars. You're not getting quite as much variation.
Right.
But Pulteney, based on where it is and how they had to sort of build up and build sideways and do all these things, has very, very unique pockets. And I just wanted to just touch on the fact that you have to be there for a really, really long time to get a feel for how this stuff is going to come out, how it's going to work. And I think that's one of the things that makes Pulteney unique. And I was just curious. I wanted to touch on that with you.
Yeah. Everything that goes into a bottle of Old Pulteney, like if whatever bottle it is, whatever from the 12 through the core range to the vintages to whatever we produce, all of that is aged in wick. Okay. So we're not pulling out and sending off to an offsite aging facility. Our bottling facility is in Airdrie. So we do ship our casks. And I did have the pleasure, sidebar, of loading a trolley or big giant thing full of casks. And I was like, wait, what? How many? I'm like, these things are heavy, but I digress. We've got these century-old warehouses up there. They're all stone, but it's a combination of dunnage of racked and dunnage. Okay, so to your point, with Malcolm having been there for so long, and the fact that our whiskeys are all aging on site, he literally he's like a symphony conductor, because he's laying these casks down. He knows what the end result needs to be for our bottling plan. I mean, there is a little bit of non-romantic, element to it. We do have to, we are producing something that we need to put in a bottle and sell. So we have to look at a long range goal, but, he's knowing, so just for the sake of argument, say we know we need to bottle X amount of Old Pulteney 12 next year. And he knows what that end result needs to taste like. And he knows that one of the things about Old Pulteney 12 that makes it super special is that it spends the bulk of its life, at least 10 years, in the racked warehouse on the top rack. So we're talking like 9 racks up or 10 racks up, 45 feet in the air. And he is saying, all right, he knows what he's placing there. And then he knows exactly when the time is right to bring it down and then to recast it into some European or Spanish oak to place it in the dunnage warehouse. One of the things that I'm most passionate about is the fact that I get to learn something new all the time, and especially having a great relationship with the distillery managers for Ember House or the master distillers, is that, they teach me something new all the time. I'm continually learning. But one of the things that Malcolm has really impressed upon me is that where these casks sit in a warehouse, whether it's in the racked warehouse or the dunnage warehouse, will have an effect on the final outcome of the whiskey, because what's happening to the whiskey at 45 feet in the air is completely different from what's happening to it when it's 3 feet in the air. What's happening to it when it's in a centuries old stone dunnage warehouse on its side is different from when it's standing palleted in a dunnage warehouse. So for Malcolm to have been there for 30 years, to really, have, just the whole place is in his blood. Like, he knows it. He just knows. He knows what the nose of that particular cask is going to smell like and taste like and feel like if it sat exactly in this spot versus exactly in that spot. So that's what I find very interesting about Old Pulteney, that, again, and to not totally, I don't want to dismiss Stuart Harvey, our master blender, across the portfolio. The two of those guys work in tandem, where they are really, again, like they are orchestrating a symphony with these casks. And at any given time, we have like 25,000 casks up there that he has got to, he lays them down, he sings them a lullaby, he pulls a sample, tucks them in, wakes them up, moves them around. It's just, there's a lot of really intricate jigsaw puzzle type pieces going on there to get to this end result.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, and I think it's really apt that you bring up the master blender, because this is not blending as in, we need to blend this distillery with this distillery to create,
it's
Johnny Walker, right? This is vatting, and a lot of people, I think, don't fully appreciate that there's a lot of variability in how the barrels are aging. Just different things that happen along the way. There's little changes in wood, grain, all these kind of things to make it so that the barrels don't age like, oh, I lay this down, I know exactly what it's going to taste like. There's a lot of finesse in making a consistent product. People ask me about blending all the time. They're like, "Oh, blending, it's so easy. I blended, my this, and this." And it's like, cool, yeah, you can make something good if you go and take these whiskeys off your shelf and start blending them together that are already good whiskeys. But can you recreate it? And can you recreate it with things that are changing? That's where I think a lot of the skill and a lot of the experience lies that goes underappreciated.
There's two things. I can say this with my hand over my heart. There's two things that go into to making Scotch whiskey, two big factors. One is science, because there is a science to this. I mean, and so again, I sometimes I don't like to divulge and take away from the romance, but the reality of the situation is the blenders and the guys in the lab that are testing samples. I mean, they're wearing white lab coats. I mean, they've got science degrees. I mean, they're biology guys and girls and women. So there's science, but the other side of it is dark art or magic. So it's when you take the scientist that is Stuart Harvey and you take the magician that is Malcolm Waring, and they get to come together to create, it's where the ultimate, like I say, the greatest gift that Scotland has to offer, which is single malt, comes into play. Some people say it's golf, but they're wrong. It's Scotch.
It's Scotch. Yeah, seriously, it's definitely Scotch. All right, I want to change track for a second,
okay,
because I know you've shown the 12 and the 15.
Oh, you want to talk about the cool one? Right?
Yes, I do. But I wanted to preface it because the next one we have is the Hut Art, which I won't bury the lead. The next one is the Hut Art, and the Hut Art is the newest non-age statement release, and it's really interesting because non-age statement is such a touchy subject these days, and in some cases I think it's really for good reason, because you do see a lot of these NASs come out. That you hear when you're in the industry through the grapevine that it's young whiskey, and it's some of these bigger companies that are really trying to steal shelf space. And it's a business, I get it, and that's that. But I think non-age statement whiskeys give distilleries an opportunity to experiment and try some new things. And exactly. And I'll let you speak to this, because obviously I know what they do with the Hut Art, but I think what they did with the Hut Art is really, really cool.
Yeah,
and I think if you don't know and you just couch it with all of the other NASs that are coming out, you may breeze by it in a store when really it should be the one that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So here it is, and I'm going to pour some. I hate doing the thing where you can do mirror image so that everybody can see it and read it, but it flips my room around behind me, and it makes me dizzy, so I'm not going to do it.
And we're 2 whiskeys in, so
we're 2 whiskeys in.
We don't need to be flipping rooms around.
Just read right to left for a minute. It's HUDDART, right? It's Hut Art.
Okay.
Nick, don't worry.
Everybody pour the whiskey. I would pour some, but I just actually poured some more 15. So
I'll pour it.
I got ahead of the game. I thank you. You're absolutely right on a lot of counts. I do want to say one thing about non-age statement, or NAS. I'm a firm believer that if everybody wants to keep drinking good single malt or single malt, you have to peel your blinders back a little bit and engage with the NAS movement, because the cold hard fact of the matter is 12, 15 years ago, there was no way we could have forecasted a boom in especially in America, that we would be bathing in age statement Scotch whiskey. So, but to shut out the fact that it doesn't have a number, you're really doing yourself a disservice. I mean, this is my motto. It's my personal mantra when it comes to Scotch. Is the liquid good? Yes, I will drink it. Is the liquid not good? No, I will not drink it. And that can apply to a 50-year-old or a 3-year-old. Doesn't matter. So, I mean, don't discount it because it doesn't have an age. But to your point, Nick, what this really has done, and across the board with non-age statement, it's given the distillers and the blenders, it's really removed shackles, because when you put a number on a bottle, there's laws that require you to stick to that. And what if we have some just absolutely freaking gorgeous whiskey that's 9 years old, that's ready, it's good, we're here, we love it. Yeah, we can't put it in the 12. So what do we do with it? We take it and we say, well, let's play. And I firmly believe that, you know, that's kind of the new normal, for lack of a better word. And I don't mean to tie that into any of this, but yeah, you don't judge a whiskey by its number. You should really judge a whiskey by taking a chance and taking a sip. But to that end, we'll get to what makes Huddart so special. So when we launched our new core range, and that was back in October, or we actually launched it a year prior in March, or not quite a year prior in March globally, but we launched it in the US in March or in October, which you were a part of. We had a previous NAS in the portfolio called Navigator. Mm-hmm. And full disclosure, everybody, Navigator was my hanging around drinking Scott, Old Pulteney. That's the one I was just like, yep, I'd get a really large format ice cube. I'd crack some of that Navigator and I'm like, awesome. It's Tuesday. I'm on a patio. All good. But we really needed to, you know, we had room for one non-age statement in the portfolio. We were launching a new core range. So we wanted to put something in there that was a little bit different. So the Navigator, if you were a fan or a friend or you liked it, has been archived. If you love it, you talk to Nick and maybe he can tell you in Massachusetts or Boston where to get some, or you come to Pittsburgh and visit me and we'll just drink a couple of the bottles that I have left over. But we had room for one NAS and we wanted to shake it up a little bit. So what we did for this particular whiskey is we wanted to create something that really kind of tied in with the brand message. And part of the brand message is our provenance and our heritage. The distillery sits on Huddart Street in Wick. So that's the address of the street that we sit on. So this is just about, you know, the Huddart is absolutely about where we come from and who we are. But what Malcolm has gone and done with this, and Stuart, is they've aged this whiskey in, I want to say second fill American oak, in a dunnage warehouse. So you've got it and it's sitting on the top rack and it spends the majority of its life up there. But the twist is when he pulls it down, and that's exactly the same start to life that the 12-year-old has, right? But when he decides that it's ready, and it's non-age statement, so I hand over my heart, I don't know the age. I mean, when I think of non-age statement, I don't like people like pulling me, like, come on, Steph, I don't know. It's non-age statement. Again, is it good? Yes, I will drink it. Is it bad? I will not. But so when he feels that it's ready, he pulls it down and then he like recasks it into American oak that has previously held very heavily peated malt. So, and it's a finish at this point. I mean, we're spending south of 2 years, but the malt is not peated, but the whiskey that lived in here for the first fill was so heavily peated that there's definitely a rich phenolic content to this whiskey that we've never really had as part of the core range for Old Pulteney. For all of your fans out there, Nick, I'm sure you're aware of this one. You might even have a little bit if you still do or were able to find some. The 1989 vintage, which won mad respect and awards. Jim Murray, everybody just went nuts. And this was, I don't know, 6 years ago-ish, I think. Went crazy, very limited release. But that was that was kind of, we took a cue from how much people love that. And we created something within the core range that could live, that appealed to that peated whiskey aficionado. Again, it is not, we're not pushing any kind of envelope on the ppm. So, you know, if you are a Ardbeg Uigeadail drinker, or if you're an Anok Cutter or Pete Hart fan, it's not going to have that kind of punch to it. But much the same way the 12-year is my session whiskey, this is the classic session whiskey for a peated whiskey drinker.
Okay, I will tell you. Okay, so first, John Shu wrote in the thing before you started talking. He wrote, 100 versus 1989 slightly peated. Fight! But I thought it was really funny because he's right on the money. He knows exactly.
But we didn't mean it to be a fight. It's like 1989 like had a baby and said, "Go ahead."
Yes, exactly. And then the other thing I would say is the 100. I was taking tasting notes before this, and I was just revisiting it for a minute, and it does have that slight smoke, and you do get it. I think you get it really on the nose.
Yeah.
However, it's not just the 12-year with some peat. It is a honey bomb. It is sweet and honeysuckle and cantaloupe and just some really, really interesting notes that are layered on top with smoke in a very, very approachable way. I sort of think it's the gateway whiskey for a lot of people who maybe don't, so many times I've gone and done a tasting somewhere, or I've done a private tasting, and I'm doing a tasting for somebody, and there's somebody else in there and I say, "Hey, do you want to try this?" And they'll say, "Oh, I don't drink scotch. It's so damn smoky."
Right. And
that what happened was they went into a bar or a store and they said, "I love a scotch." And somebody said, "Oh, here's Lafroig," right? And it was the first whiskey they ever had. And all they associate with scotch is like burnt rubber and...
Or they possibly stole a bottle of Lafroig from their dad's liquor cabinet when they were 15, and no good came from that.
And got sick as hell, right? But the point is, like, so many people get turned off of peat because the first venture into it is like, it's like if the first hopped IPA you ever had was Heady Topper, you just get knocked over the head with it,
right,
and you never go back. And I really believe that the Huddart is just such a beautiful little introduction into smoke, because you get it on the nose and it's just a seasoning over what is already an excellent whiskey.
And what I like about it is when, as you well know, when we talk about the science, that's part of it. When you add a drop of water, typically whiskeys become sweeter because, it pulls out the esters. But when I add a drop of water to Huddart, I think the smoke becomes accentuated. So I put a little drop of water in there. So if you are that person that likes it a little bit, a little bit more of a punch, then I firmly, believe that a drop of water, there you go. Oh, you've got the source water. Look at you. You came with your glove on, my friend.
Oh yeah, I know. I brought my source water. I brought my Speyburn source water, and I do just that. I'll just put, and it's, you really don't need much.
No, we're talking like 2 drops.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because I was doing a little research on this for a tasting we were doing, and people ask all the time, like, should you do an introduction course, and people say, "Oh, should I put ice in my whiskey? Should I put water in my whiskey?" And the answer is, if you like it, do it. But the other answer is,
try it all the different ways. Go from neat to water to ice, because all of those things change the molecular structure of the spirit, and you're going to get something different out of it. You just got to settle with where your palates are.
Yes.
But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. I that's exactly right. And so, but what was interesting is I was looking up chemically what happens when you drop a water to whiskey, and there was a recent study that was published that I think it's pronounced like glycol. It's one of the chemical compounds that's responsible for the smoky smells in whiskey, part like some of the phenols. And when you put a drop of water in, you'll actually see on the surface of your glass all that kind of oily, hazy, whatever.
It's just like it, especially in unchill filtered. And to make, to all your again, are really hardcore, I call you, and I say this with love because I count myself in your number, are whiskey geeks out there. This NAS is actually bottled at 46 ABV. Yes. So you've got the non-chill filtered in there, which is that's kind of rare for non-age statement whiskeys. Yeah. Typically, they're, to your point, we're trying to keep the lights on, or trying to get something to the market a little quicker than 12 years. And there are some amazing, I call them competitive distilleries out there with some amazing non-age statements. But the fact that we came to the table with a 46 ABV, so you got, and it's all natural color, non-chill filtered. I mean, it's everything that you hope for. So to your point, don't turn your back on it.
Don't turn your back.
Name, right? right?
Right. And when you put it in, this chemical, this glycol will actually rise right to the surface.
Right.
And it's amazing because it's such faint peat compared to the big guys that sometimes you're not even sure it's there. And then you put a drop of water in and you're like,
and it just blows up, right?
There it is.
Yeah.
There it is, right there.
And to in the event that anybody's asking, which they may very well be, about the source of the casks that are peated before the so I'm going to get ahead of the game on this.
Yep.
It is Highland peat, but I'm not going to divulge to you the casks that and the reason for that
I'm sure there are guesses.
I'm sure there are guesses, but the reason for that and here's the honest reason is that could change. You know what I mean? We're with our wood program at Pulteney and across the board at Inverhouse, we're committed to sourcing the best casks that we can get, and also, again, there's we are a business, so to commit to a cask that we might be using, it's not responsible of us to do that. So because that may change based on what Malcolm and Stuart feel is going to be the best use to make sure this outcome sticks the same every time you buy a bottle. Because we certainly couldn't ask you to spend $70 a bottle and change the recipe every time. So to commit to, we're using these casks, that may change. So I can't say.
Right.
But I can say that it's Highland peat, not Isla peat. So there's definitely, you're definitely going to get as much of the acrid quality that you get off of Isla peat. I find it to be, when I look at peat styles, I look at Isla and I look at, say, the northern islands, like Highland Park, for instance, which has got no wood influence on it. And I look at Isla, which has got a lot of like briny seaweed. Its farm burns it burns blacker and acrid. And then you've got Highland peat that sits kind of in the middle because there are some wood influence on it. And it doesn't necessarily have, the maritime influence, but it's Highland peat. So it's not as general as, say, what Highland Park's doing, and not as like acrid bomb that, say, Ardbeg or Lefroy is doing. So it sits right kind of in the middle of that.
Yeah, I think sometimes we're just dying for transparency, and a lot of times the reason that somebody is not declaring what it is not because it's some dirty secret they don't want to tell you, but it's because, like, hey, what if this changes because of whatever reason?
Right.
We're stuck, right? So it is really interesting. I wanted to, before we do the hopefully becoming famous lightning round, I wanted to ask you, it's really cool having you here because you've worked with a handful of distilleries and really gotten a broader experience with single malt Scotch whiskey, and just branching off of this Huddart is it's really such a cool little experiment that really went well. What do you see coming down the line? And it doesn't just have to be IBHL. Where do you see the innovation coming? Where would you really like to see people experimenting more?
Well, and I say this just so please everybody just keep it in context. And I use the word unfortunately, and I don't mean that in a bad sense, but there's only so many things we can do.
Yes.
We're allowed to use barley, check. We're allowed to use water, check. We're allowed to use yeast, check. Which is great. So, to be considered and put that on our label, we got to do this. But if I were to just take a wild stab at the places that we have the ability to disrupt, to use the marketing term, or to innovate, I think that you're going to start to see what more of, not just, it's happening already, but whiskeys aging in or finishing or further maturation, whatever the case may be, in very non-traditional casks that have held stuff. And you can see it. I think when you look at the likes of, one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, Dr. Bill Lumsden, what he did at Glenmorangie really pushed an envelope at a time when that envelope hadn't been pushed. Because, it was like all of a sudden, what do you mean you're using Sauterne casks from France. Well, it's oak. It's in Scotland. It's okay. So you push the envelope a little bit and look at the outcome. You're seeing, the likes of, the guys over at William Grant with, Fire and Cane. You're seeing, them finding and ex beer casks. You're seeing that. So I think that when we look at how we can innovate and still stay true to ourselves and our heritage and, what we really can do, I think it's going to be more interesting flavors that are imparted from the cask, not from, the initial 3 or 2 ingredients or 3 ingredients.
Interesting.
So I think that that's where we can go. So, and I can tell you that, new product development, or NPD, as we call it in the industry, it's big on everybody's list.
Yeah.
Because, let's say even 10 years ago, or maybe 15 to be a little bit more fair, there were only a certain amount of brands that people really knew. And consumers, the end user, the drinker, was only sort of educated, but that's all changed. So, there needs to be stuff that engages people, because people just want to try new stuff and they want to make their own decisions. So I really think that where you're going to see a lot of the most, in my opinion, kind of coolest stuff starting to happen is what that cask held before. And I can't give away the whole candy store,
of course,
but I can tell you that we are really engaged in that right now, and not just at Old Pulteney, but across the board with the IBHL Inverhouse portfolio, which is fun. It's fun.
That is fun. Yeah. Fun. All right. It is time for the lightning round.
Oh no. And I told you, for full disclosure, anybody paying attention, Nick wanted to give me a sneak peek at the lightning round. And I said, no, I don't want one. So I am totally off guard with all of this. But I think I need to pour myself a little bit more whiskey, because I'm like 80% like excited and 20% afraid.
All right. You pour yourself a little whiskey. I set up my curtains here, and in honor of the white lightning round, I feel like I'm being stabbed by this one little.
I do, and I can see it.
You pour yourself a drink. I'm literally
like a lightsaber.
It's absolutely killing me. So give me 1 second, and you pour yourself something good. Phil, do some singing, or no, just everybody stay there for 2 seconds.
The fiddle, start playing something.
We'll do the first verse of Auld Lang Syne. That's the only one I know. And I had to find out the hard way. There's like a whole bunch of verses.
There are, in fact.
I know there are. There he is. He's back. There he is.
All right. It's not technically fixed, but it's better. The sun comes down and it hits this one spot and it just hammers me right in the face.
You gotta get a tan in a very particular spot.
All right. It's time for the white lightning round. So, whiskey apocalypse hits, and you can save 5 distilleries. And here's the catch. Here's the catch 22. You're only allowed to save 1 from your portfolio. So you have to save 4 other distilleries around the world.
Okay.
They don't have to all be in Scotland. What are the 5 distilleries you save?
All right. I'm saving Yamazaki.
Oh, boom. Okay.
I am saving Glenmorangie. I am saving Catoctin Creek in Virginia.
Wow.
I am saving Whistle Pig. I got a little rye. And the 5th one, I love you guys. I love you all. Like, I love everybody, but I'm saving Old Pulteney.
Oh, baby. Actually, it's funny you say Whistle Pig, because the chief blender of Whistle Pig is actually in the feed right now. He's just chilling in the comment section right now. That was not planned. Just everyone should know that was
this literally, I didn't know what was coming. This was off the top of my head.
the most, I mean, the blind side was Catoctin Creek. I'm really intrigued by that. Is there any particular reason?
It's such a cool story, and it's such a, I had the very good fortune of meeting the family and meeting the husband and wife team that run it, and I love an underdog story, and they did it, and the whiskey's good. It's good.
It is.
So that's, I mean, I don't like I'm not walking around drinking rye like, it's my job, but I just think that they would be worth saving because, you got to figure, like, what's everybody's place? If I can say it's an apocalypse, what's everybody bringing to the table? They're going to bring something special to the table, and their whiskey's solid, very solid. And Whistle Pig, I love you, and this is great, but there's no way I'm not going to save anything that's a heritage of Dave Pickerel.
Ooh, strong.
That needs to survive.
Okay. All right. Next question. All right.
Okay.
So, you're not drinking scotch. What's in your glass?
Totally out of the category. I know everybody would expect me to say Korean gin, but that's not the case. Love it.
Okay.
If I'm not drinking scotch, I am drinking, actually, it's a 50-50 of two things. I'm either drinking Cabernet, red wine, or I'm drinking bubbles. And for me, bubbles lives, like, my everyday bubble is a cava, a good cava from Spain. We could go on a whole diatribe of my aggravation with true French champagne. So I would drink French sparkling. So non-vintage sparkling from France, cava, or actually California Cabernet. The Paso Robles is what I'm digging right now. Anything from up there. Yeah.
All right, and perfect timing because it's 7:01 right now.
Okay.
So the final question. All right, so we've all had an unpleasant experience with this bloody pandemic. What is your guilty pleasure that you've lost during this damn pandemic? What's the thing that you're just guilty pleasure? Not like big things. We can't see our family. I know, like it's a nightmare. But what's the guilty pleasure that's been stolen from you that you just want back?
Look at my roots, my hair, my hair. The fact that I don't get to visit Grace Minardi at the Devant Salon in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn every 6 weeks is just killing me. I can get by with every other thing. I've figured out how to do my own pedicures. I'm like now an expert. I'm a classically trained chef, so cooking and doing this all good. I've figured out technology to the extent that I can do this, and I've got that, and all of that stuff. I don't care. I'll wear the same. I've washed my clothes. I'll wear the same thing weeks in a row. I can't do my hair. I'm spiky blonde. It's my hair.
Yeah, my girlfriend's cousin just took an absolute weed whacker to my head. There was just no other option. I was like, oh, what the hell am I going to do?
I have done the clippers, and that was all cool, but I can't do anything about the color.
Can't do anything about the color. Yeah. That'll do it. All right.
So my guilty pleasure is my hair.
It's all one color up here.
I told you. I'm like you're already like, I'm envious of you, Phil, but I'm not gonna, because if I shave my hair, it would be like that Sinead O'Connor kind of thing, and I'm not going down that path yet.
It wouldn't be Natalie Portman in V for Vendetta.
No. and probably TMI, but like my head is kind of really small, so I would shave it, and I would just have this like little pea head, this bald little pea head, and I can't do it. I just can't.
All right, that's fantastic.
From 5 whiskeys in.
That's how you end the show. Phil, do we have any burning questions? Anything I can't address later? Is there anything that we're dying for?
I'm looking through, but pretty much everybody has said what they're going to say. Yeah, Sammy mentioned Cremant de Jura for a nice sparkling, and I
thank you, Sammy. Anything you talk to me about French sparkling, I live in Pennsylvania now with a really screwed up liquor store system, and they're not open, but like maybe we can work out a trade, Sammy.
Hey, I've shipped olive oil to Sammy during this whole thing.
I love olive oil shipments.
All right, that's enough. We're already over. Steph, thank you so much for coming on.
This
Really,
was
really a
an
pleasure.
absolute hoot. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I mean, I know, Nick, you and I go way back before we were like involved professionally together. You were the geekiest whiskey asking guy that ever sent me an email after I visited you at Gordon's. And I was like, who is this guy? I better get on my game. You actually inspired me to really, really deep dive and learn more and be prepared. So for that, I thank you. And Phil, you're like my new friend. But to everybody out there, thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm happy whenever you want. I mean, I got, 3 more distilleries and a gin that we can drink whiskey anytime. I got
Absolutely.
nothing but time.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. We will definitely have you back.
Okay.
All right. Love everybody. Stay safe. Phil, cut the feed. Cut the feed, Phil.
Cut the feed.
Get out of here.
No, there's a button around here somewhere. I'm sure it's
Phil, did you cut the feed yet or not?